with its maritime climate and golden sandy beaches, is a splendid getaway spot. An island off the eastern coast of New York, it is well known for its many vineyards and wineries. This view is west of the Atlantic Ocean, surrounded by the Long Island Sound and Peconic Bay.
So Long Island was first planted in the early 70s. So the first producer that was out here, they're not here anymore, but if they had still been in business, it would be about 40 years. In Long Island, we specialize in Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc for the whites. Those are our most popular. And for the reds, Merlot, Cabernet Franc are our two main reds. We have some Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon. We do a lot of blends for both red and white. So here on Long Island, we have kind of a late bud break in spring. So our season starts a little bit later than, say, California or the West Coast. But then we always have warm summer. You know, our growing season, we get plenty of heat. So that helps the grapes to grow. We also get a little bit of rain during the growing season, which is not bad because our soil is very sandy. So when it rains, you know, it drains out of the soil really fast. And the rain actually helps the vines during the growing season. And then in the fall, you know, we usually start picking in September. And by then, you know, we've had a fair amount of warm days to ripen the fruit. And then we'll harvest through November.
Maritime climate, so it's a cool maritime climate, which means that we stick out into the Atlantic Ocean a bit, so we're very much moderated by the Atlantic Ocean, and we have the Gulf Stream that comes right up the coast, bringing warm air and warm water with it. So places like the South Fork at the end of the fall are actually still quite warm. We're actually a little bit warmer than you are in the city towards the end of the fall because it regulates the temperature out here. So where Roanoke Vineyards is located in Riverhead, it's what they call the banana belt, where we're far enough inland where we have the wider mass of land that helps us warm up sooner in the spring, so we actually hit bud break before the vineyards east of us, but we're far enough east that we are moderated by that maritime climate, so when the early frosts come in the fall, we don't get frosts. How do the grapes grow? It's an annual cycle, starting in about mid-May. So what happens is we hit bud break, and that's when the buds literally just kind of pop out and you start to see the leaves open up. Immediately the shoots start to lengthen, and over a very short amount of time you have a very rapid amount of growth. And about mid to late June is when we see the flowering start to happen. And they're very tiny little flowers, and they're self-pollinating, which means that the pollen it pollinates itself. So as long as we have the right conditions, you know, dry, still air, you'll start to see the flowers fall off, and right behind it is the little tiny berry. And that berry will stay green until about the end of August, and then you'll start to see the berries swell, and then in September you'll start seeing what's called veraison, where the skins soften up and the berries start, you know, for the red grapes, they start to darken up and turn purple, red, black. For the white grapes, they start to turn more golden in color. And then harvesting usually, depending on who you're talking to, you know, the kind of saying in the winery is, you know, you harvest 2 weeks after the vineyard manager wants to pull it in. Because there's a period of time where the grapes are ripe. They've physically got the right attributes to be ripe. They've got sugar, the acids have dropped, they've got color, but what the winemaking staff is looking for is a certain flavor profile. So we could pick the grapes right when they hit about 20 bricks, but usually what we like to do is leave them out there for another week, 2 weeks, to allow them to get as much sugar as possible, let some of those acids drop out, and let the flavors develop.
We add yeast to some of our wines, and some of them we'll let them go naturally. So it's kind of a combination of the two. Most of the time we'll add yeast. So I'll select a yeast that I like, and I'll use it for whatever grape that we're fermenting. Sometimes a fermentation might go on its own and naturally, and if everything smells good, then I'll just let it go on its own. The white wines, I'll decide to add yeast, just because, I want, with the whites, I feel like I'm trying to create that style, and I'm using different yeast to create different flavor profiles. With the reds, I'm more open to letting them go on their own. But it also depends on the quality of the fruit also, like how healthy the fruit is. So if there's any rot on the fruit and things like that, then I'm more careful about letting it go on its own because there could be bad bacteria or bad yeast on the fruit. So I'm more careful if the fruit's not perfect. All the yeast and everything will settle to the bottom. So if we want to make the wine more clear, to clarify the wine, we'll take the wine out of this valve because all the sediment will be down here. So the clear wine will come out of here, and then we can open this door and look in and see that we're taking the clear wine, and then all the lees or all the yeast will be at the bottom of the tank at the end. Most of our machines that we use in the winery come from Europe. So from Italy or from Germany. That's where most of them are designed and produced, and then they're brought over to the United States. And I think that's because the wine industry has been in Europe for a long time. And then all of our tanks have temperature control. So you can see all these dimples here. This whole thing's a jacket that a liquid runs through that can either heat or cool the tank. If we want to heat the wine or cool it down, we can do either one. So we keep control of the temperature during fermentation and during aging for the wine. One of the most important things in winemaking is keeping everything clean. And that allows us to, have a clean winery allows better quality because, we don't have any bad bacteria, bad yeast in the winery. Once you have a clean winery, the next, thing is good fruit, good quality fruit. And you can't make a good wine without good fruit. So, in the vineyard, it's very important the work they're doing in the vineyard. So once you bring that fruit here to the winery where everything's ready for the fruit, then from then it's just a matter of paying attention to the wine. If it's aging in barrels, then tasting it and making sure that it's not in the barrels for too long. And then the blending is very important too. So making a blend that's balanced and that's going to age well, and those are all things that are important. So there's a lot of steps to making a good wine. That was very exciting. That's great. Long Island is very different from where I grew up, but it's also similar at the same time. So I grew up in a small town that was in wine country in California. So it's similar in the feeling that a lot of, everyone knows each other, and there's a great industry of grapes. Here it's different because we're so close to the water, and also because on Long Island, there's a lot of other types of agriculture also. So farming and, people raising chickens and, vegetable farms and, the fishing market and things like that. Where I grew up, it was just wine. So it's kind of fun to live somewhere where there's other types of agriculture going on. My philosophy for making wine, I believe in trying to let the wine show what our region is. So not trying to make the same wine every year, but to accept the fact that we have vintage variation. So if it's a really hot year, then we'll make the wines in a style that expresses that year. So, more riper wines. And in a colder year, maybe a lighter style, more elegant style of wine. So every year I want to try to demonstrate what actually happened here instead of trying to make the same wine every year, because if you try to do that, then you're going to be manipulating the wine. So kind of letting everything speak for the vineyard and speak for the vintage.
kid, I grew up out here, so my family moved up here when I was about 2 years old, and my grandparents were very into wine, but mostly, French wines. But when I was little, my aunts would take me around, with them because I was like their little tag along when I was a kid. So one of the places we actually went to was Pindar when I was too young to be at a winery, and my aunts had tasted this wine, and it was a sparkling wine. And, being a little kid, I'm like, I want to try it. So they gave me like a little tiny sip. And I just remember like the effervescence of the bubbles like dancing on my tongue. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing, because it wasn't anything I'd really ever experienced before. It must have been a really low alcohol wine because it didn't bother me. But that was my first taste that I can remember of Long Island wine. And I just remember being in that massive, beautiful tasting room with all these people around, and it was just such a cool vibe, and having grown up out here and seeing what it's developed into has been pretty special.
One of the unforgettable moments for me with Long Island wine was the first time I tasted a Long Island red wine. It was a barrel sample from 2005, and it hadn't been bottled yet or blended, and it was just so expressive and rich, and just was so elegant and beautiful, and it made me realize the quality here on Long Island, and it surprised me. I didn't know a lot about Long Island wine, and I was very impressed, and it made me want to be a part of making those kinds of wines. I also have great memories of tasting older vintages, from early on in the wine industry out here, including, some of the first wines made at McCary. One of the greatest wines I've tasted from here is the 97 Cabernet Franc, which was their first vintage. So, like, beautiful wines that have aged really well. Our Sauvignon Blanc pairs really well with local seafood. So the citrus grapefruit style of the Sauvignon Blanc matches really well with our local oysters or clams and things like that are just so fresh. Similar to the wine, it's just fresh. It's just freshness in your mouth. Our Cabernet Franc, it's very savory, earthy. It goes well with Long Island duck, or kind of even something really gamey like like venison or things like that. So you get the savory notes of the wine going, and the high acid of the wine pairing with the fattiness of the meat, and it's usually a really nice pairing. Our full-bodied red blend, the Bergen Road, it's a blend of Merlot, Cab Franc, Cab Sauv, Petit Verdot, and Malbec, and it's really full-bodied, really tannic, and it goes well with steak or kind of a more heavy meal that needs, that wants a wine that kind of holds up to it. And then our dessert style wine, that goes well. Our Block E, it's a ice wine style, and it could go well with cheese, with chocolate is a good pairing, foie gras, things like that. Where again, the sweetness of the wine is playing off the different aspects of those types of foods. So with the blue cheese, it might be the saltiness of the cheese going really well with the sweet wine. So you can get lots of fun different pairings, and then things that are unexpected too. It's always fun to experiment and try something like a rosé with venison, and see how it works, because sometimes you're surprised with how things match. Long Island wines, I think quality-wise, can compete with wines from around the world. I mean, it's a different style, and it's hard to compare. You can't really say like our wines are just like Bordeaux or whatever, because we're our own unique region. I think we definitely have the quality to stand up against the wines of the world. The one thing that will keep our region from being known around the world is just the fact that we're so small. So, overall, we don't make a lot of wine on Long Island. So it'll be hard for our wine to spread too far into the world just because there's a very small amount of it. We're a small region. There's only maybe 40 wineries. And you look at California, there's hundreds of wineries, or, Australia, or bigger regions. So I think the quality is there. It's just a matter of, you know, we'll, I guess, you know, we can compete. We just might never become so well known just because we're a small region. So, you know, we're trying to get people to be more aware and to try our wines. Our wines are being found more in New York City now, so international tourists and stuff can try them in a lot of the restaurants there. So that's important also to kind of open people's minds to Long Island wine.
And here we have Long Island. New York's Long Island boasts some of the finest vineyards and the perfect climate to growing and producing highest quality wines. Many of the wineries feature tours and wine tastings. So visit the winery, sample the current vintage, and see how Long Island vintners have perfected their craft. With all that you have heard and seen, pour yourself one of New York's finest wines. Swirl the glass, take a whiff, and take a sip. You will like what you taste.
Life on Long Island is a lot different than life in the city, or how I would imagine life in the city. During the winter, it's very quiet out here. It's more relaxed. And during the summer, it's busy out here, but again, it's a more relaxed lifestyle. We're close to the beach, so you know, you can go to the beach, relax, enjoy all the local food. One of the best things about Long Island, out where we are, is all the farms and you know, the local produce, the local meat, and all of that, which goes really well with our wines. So you can get a complete meal from start to finish that is 100% local, which is really special. And I think that's what attracts people to come out here from the city, is that kind of slower lifestyle, more relaxed, being able to sit by the water and watch the sunset over the water, and just kind of, I guess, breathe fresh air. At nighttime, when it's dark during the summer, like, you can see all the stars because it's just open space here. There's not big skyscrapers and everything like that. So you really feel close to nature, and it's just, it's a beautiful lifestyle out here.